What's up, everyone? This is Frank here for a Week 6 recap. I want to thank my Patreon community so much again for tuning in. And we're going to be going over the games that happened this past weekend, talking about some of the top performances, some quick evaluation points that I saw on my end. We're getting closer and closer to playoff season, and this is such an important time of the year for both the teams trying to get into the playoffs, number one, to have an opportunity to play for a section title, but also the teams that don't have a playoff shot, either trying to pull off upsets, ruin other people's season, or seniors playing their last game for their programs, right? And young players trying to establish themselves for some momentum heading into next year. So many different things going on. But another great week of football. And I know that, we had some huge performances, upsets. This week's teams of the week is actually tied. I have my Marinick. I'm rocking the shirt Tigers Pride right here for my Marinick and Fox Lane, but I don't have Fox Lane gear. So I'm just going to give a shout out to them. But I got the Marinick shirt on. Going to be rocking this for the preview show as well. So definitely going to wash it right after this. But let's dive into the different performances, guys. First things first, let's go to the Friday games, then Saturday. It's going to be pretty random. Let's start with Irvington at Albertus Magnus. Albertus Magnus winning 38-12, moving them to 2-4. Irvington drops to 0-6, and Irvington's had problems defending all season long. They give up a lot of big plays. Offensively, they've shown that they can move, but Albertus Magnus at times had struggled moving the football. So this was an opportunity for them to get their offense going. They did that. They have been pretty stout defensively for the most part, and they held Irvington in check. So they get a nice victory there for them. Let's get to the next game. Double A game, Yonkers Brave at Arlington. Arlington winning 49-8. Arlington goes to 7-0 for their big matchup next week to the final regular season game. Yonkers Brave drops to 0-7. Just starting off on Yonkers Brave, Noah Olgers, he was 8 of 22 with a touchdown, but the two INTs are ones that really hurt. Perez had the receiving touchdown. We had Jaden Rush who made some plays. We had some Dixon who had 4 receptions. But too much. Arlington is just on a different level right now. Tough to compete with them for a long period of time, especially up front. And when I look at Arlington, they scored 42 points in the first half, and this is without their quarterback Resigno. Again, don't really know the status of that. But Feldman stepped in for them at the quarterback spot, and he did a pretty good job. 6 of 10, 113 yards passing, a touchdown, also had a rushing touchdown. Davenport really led the way with over 100 yards rushing, 118 yards and 4 touchdowns, also had 4 tackles defensively. Alex LaRue, he also had made a nice impact in this game with a rushing touchdown and an INT. Lavello's had now a couple weeks, these last few weeks, he had a receiving touchdown again. He's been making plays on both sides of the ball. His name keeps coming up at these games on tape. Nick DeGusto was very active defensively with 5 tackles. Jaden Tuttle's another one who's a guy who's been making some big plays. He also had an INT. This offense rushed for 229 yards and defensively only allowing 143. So pretty, again, dominant performance at home on both sides of the football. Pretty good job by Arlington there. They go to 7-0. Let's talk about an A matchup now. Yorktown at Brewster. Yorktown winning 37-6, moving Yorktown to 7-0, and Brewster drops to 2-4. This is a big league game right here. Let's start with Yorktown, and then I'll get to Brewster. And focusing in on Yorktown, Caden Gonzalez, another strong performance for him, 16 of 25, 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. That pushes him over 1,000 yards passing and 17 touchdowns in 7 games. So really nice milestones there for Gonzalez. But this is, again, a team that can beat you multiple ways. Del Vecchio, 82 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Chris Constantine is also a real integral part of this team on both sides of the ball, both running the ball. He's had 58 yards rushing, receiving out of the backfield in the slot. He also had 6 receptions for 82 yards and touchdown, and defensively with 5 tackles. So he does a little bit of everything for you. Really important part of this team. Costello had a receiving touchdown. Weissman had an INT on defense. And really, this defense continues to grow, only allowing 6 points. And it was kind of when they put some backups in. Connor Duncan, he had a rushing touchdown and an INT. Ryan Vogel had an INT. So he forcing, again, 3 turnovers here. 2 of them out of the first 3 possessions for Brewster were really put Yorktown and gave them all the momentum. Chad Bowen was also very active with 5 tackles. And now going to Brewster, the offense has struggled these last couple weeks, and it struggled in this game. 2 turnovers, like I mentioned, in the first 3 drives, really going to put you behind. They had 3 turnovers total. In passing, they have to make better decisions in the passing game. Fox had 3 INTs. Dillon did have a passing touchdown. He was 3 of 5. They got to get back to trying to run the ball, not turning the ball over. Barry only had 28 yards rushing. But this defense And the only thing that's upsetting, and when you get turnovers and a short field, really put your defense in a bind. But I feel like the struggles on offense started to bleed into the defense a little bit. But, Howell, he had the receiving touchdown and 6 tackles. Parcello was very active with 12 tackles. Accurso is another one who's been super active as well. He's been a strong defender with them with 10 tackles. Lamaro's also been active, and Carlson forced the fumble. But defensively, you want to see this defense really set the tone for Brewster, and they're still in the playoff run. So you want to see them turn around and then offensively making smart decisions on that end. Let's go to the next A matchup. One of the big upsets of the week and one of my teams of the week, which was Mahopac at Fox Lane, with Fox Lane pulling off a huge upset, winning 10-7 versus Mahopac, dropping Mahopac to 4-3, Fox Lane to 3-3. And on the Mahopac side, offensively, they had a tough time. They moved the ball, but they couldn't finish drives. And at times, they got shut down as well. So the offense has had some troubles. You've seen it, too, over the last 3 weeks. They have not scored an offensive touchdown. They did last week. But Koch had a kick return touchdown where really felt like the momentum was pulled back to their side, right? They gave up a field goal. The defense made a nice job, nice stop. Ensuing kickoff, Koch takes it to the end zone, right? So he's such a spark plug, important player for this team. But they had difficulties when Koch wasn't getting these big chunk plays, moving the ball offensively, especially when they were double teaming Carney. Other guys have to make plays, right? Defensively, they forced another 2 turnovers, right? So defensively only gave up 10 points, right? So they did give up yards, but they forced turnovers. Fox Lane's offense didn't move that well, but at the end, what Fox Lane did to keep their playoffs alive, they kept grinding. Didn't give up when bad things happened, and that's really important. And it was led by this defense, right? The defense really set the tone for Fox Lane. They locked things down. They kept Mahopac out of the end zone except for the kick return, which I don't understand why teams are still kicking to Koch, and it's led by their defensive line and Bailey, the linebackers like Minotti, and even to the secondary who did a solid job of defending these guys. And special teams, I know they kicked it over to Koch, like I mentioned a couple times, but they had a big field goal when a drive stalled for 3 points. Carlos Monroe blocked the field goal when Mahopac tried to go for it, which was a huge one, giving them momentum. And then offensively, they struggled for the most part with a couple turnovers, but at the end, needing one drive to go all the way down and score to win the game, they were able to do that. And that was a John Cernick pass for a touchdown to Max Travis with 10 seconds left. And I liked, it was a good play call by the coaches. They went into an empty set on back-to-back plays. The first time they tried to go to the wide side of the field, a 2-receiver side, which was open, but it looked like there was miscommunication. 2 receivers ran a similar pattern. No one really knew where the ball was going. Then they go to the trip side with a seam. They had one guy go over the middle to kind of pull the safety over, and then they went up the seam, and that's where they threw it. And it was not really nice catch by Travis there, and a huge win for Fox Lane, keeping their playoffs hopes very alive now. Now they control their own destiny. Going into the final week, you win, you're definitely in. So that's a huge game for Fox Lane. Congratulations to them. And disappointing loss for Mahopac. Let's go to the next game, a B matchup. We had Nanuet at Hen Hud, and this ended up being a very good game. Nanuet winning 24-22. Let me start with Nanuet. Vin Duffy had a rushing touchdown. Logan Stemmerman had a rushing touchdown. Nanuet was getting back to the previous week, struggling to move the football, running the ball. Max Valise had a passing touchdown to Jack O'Sullivan, who also kicked the field goal. So you see multiple guys making plays for this offense. He also had that 35-yard field goal. Now, the defense did give up some big plays here, but they forced some turnovers. They had 2 INTs. They stopped a 2-point conversion when Hen Hud had a huge touchdown, a 2-point conversion that potentially tied the game. They made the stop there, and they recovered that onside kick to hang on. But Hen Hud really came back in this game, and then it looked to be pretty scary here. And he only had 47 yards passing and the 2 INTs, but he had to rely on other people to make big plays for this team. When you look at Ed Hunt and Justin Parkes, he had an 80-yard touchdown pass and also a rushing touchdown. Jeremy Hetty had the receiving touchdown. Kyle Pesky, he ran the ball relatively well against a tough, stingy rush defense. 86 yards rushing and a touchdown, also 6 tackles. Hen Hunt kept fighting till the end, and they really had an opportunity on the 2-point conversion to tie this up, and even on the onside kick. So kudos to Hen Hunt, but Nanuet stays on. Big victory there to try to get into playoff position. Let's go to the next one. Harrison at Horace Greeley. Harrison winning 42-0. A dominant performance by Harrison, winning the league here. Quarterback Marco Citro, 13 of 15 for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. If he can be efficient like this, Harrison can be pretty darn deadly. And Joe Krupe was the one leading the charge offensively. 6 catches, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also had 2 rushes for 42 yards and a touchdown. He's been a guy who's come up the last few weeks making big plays for this offense. Offense hasn't been super explosive, probably as if they wanted to, but he's been one of the spark plugs. And then Barcella, he's another guy he's a downhill runner, and getting him more involved in controlling the line of scrimmage is going to be so important for Harrison. If they want to try to make a run, they have to dominate in the running game. He also had 87 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, but this defense locked things down, and Greeley's got weapons, right? So they were dominant on the defensive end, made things very difficult for Greeley. Getting after these weapons, getting after the quarterback, and this is a dominant performance from Harrison, playing well down the stretch is going to be so important. Locking up that number 1 seed on their side, that means they're going to have at least 2 home games before the section title. So that's a big one there, and Harrison's been very impressive, especially defensively. They have really locked things down. Let's go to a really big B matchup, and that is Nyack at Lakeland, and Lakeland winning 55-24. Huge win at home for Lakeland to go to 4-3. Nyack drops to 3-3. I'm gonna start with Nyack, and offensively they move the ball, but there's way too many turnovers. I think they have 4 turnovers, 3 INTs, one of them for a touchdown and a fumble, and defensively just giving up way too many big plays. But the turnovers were absolutely killer for this team that put up, again, you put up 24 points is pretty good, but giving up 55. And when I'm looking at the on the Lakeland side, quarterback Grady Leonard, super efficient. And we got back the last couple of weeks that they were turning the ball over. They starting off really slow. Not this time around. 10 of 15, 174 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also had a rushing touchdown. So 5 touchdown performance by Grady Leonard. Their running back, Paula Castro, he also had over 100 yards rushing, 127 yards and a touchdown. Perry had over 140 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. So multiple guys making big explosive plays for this offense. And then, Anthony Fabrosi had a really good game. 2 receptions, 25 yards and a touchdown, had a kick return for a touchdown, and a fumble recovery. And then when you get to the other side, we had Jake, before I get to the other side, Jake Belingo had a receiving touchdown. But then this defense, they showed up. They have been playing pretty well the last couple weeks. Again, Nyack did score 24, but they had a defensive touchdown by DJ Brody, who had 2 INTs. Kyle Gallagher had another INT. He's been having a strong year. And Anthony Ferroni, he had 6 tackles as well. So this was such a big win for Lakeland. At home, get things back on track, starting off quicker. And they made plays on each level of the field, right? Offense, defense, and special teams. So big victory for Lakeland. Let's go to one of the big upsets of the weekend. And it's a double-A matchup. John J. Fishkill at Mamaroneck, again, rocking the Tigers pride shirt. And this was a really big surprise to me. Mamaroneck has been a tough team. Let's start with John Jay. Right out of the gate, John Jay seemed a little bit flat. Mamaroneck really got on them very quickly. They were down 14-0 right out of the gate. They've had, again, multiple opportunities to come back, but they just couldn't capitalize. They had a fumble at Mamaroneck's 12. They had a 4th down stop offensively on the 45. Quarterback Feliciano, he ran the ball very well, 153 yards rushing on 24 carries for a touchdown, only 55 yards passing. He also had a fumble. Rossi had 41 yards rushing, so they did show the ability to run the ball. They just couldn't finish drives, and the mistakes really killed them. And defensively, this wasn't their best performance. They gave up a lot of big plays, both in the passing game and the run game, and they were down 28-7 in the fourth quarter, right? So this is a team that, tough loss on the road, probably now snatches a potential home playoff game for them. But what a big victory for Mamaroneck. And going back to them, their quarterback Mackey, I thought he rebounded very well this week offensively. 8 of 10 for 120 yards and a pass touchdown, also 55 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, but he was a big he created a big momentum for Mamaroneck offensively. And also wide receiver Davidson made multiple receptions, had a huge receiving touchdown. He made again, really nice reception to help spark this offense right out of the gate. So Mackey was huge for them. This offensive line was also really good for them. Davidson made some plays, and defensively is a big thing. Keeping this high-powered John J. Fishkill offense in check is a difficult task. And I know they gave up a bunch of rushing yards, but they defended the pass very well. They also made some key stops, forcing turnovers, and it's led by T.J. Smith, who had 15 tackles and a fumble recovery in this game. He was all over the field and made some big plays for Mamaroneck to win this game. Mamaroneck goes to 4-2. John J. Fishkill now drops to 5-2. Huge league game, though. When we look into the standings, I'll talk about that next week. Let's go to the next game, double-A matchup. Mount Vernon at Ossining. This was a non-league game, and Ossining winning 37-16. pushing Ossining to 3-4. Mount Vernon dropping to 2-4. And I'm just going to start on Ossining, focusing on Ossining. The offensive line deserves a lot of credit. They ran the ball all over Mount Vernon, and it was led by Anthony LaFaro, who had 38 carries in this game, really being the bell cow and engine for this offense. 325 yards and 5 touchdowns. Absolute stunning performance by him. A lot of credit go to this offensive line, who did a really good job of moving guys. A bigger Mount Vernon team, but they moved him pretty well, and he was an absolute bell cow for this offense. Defensively, they kept Mount Vernon in check for the most part. So, again, a lot of credit to this defense. A lot of credit to the O-line, and Anthony LaFaro was an absolute monster, and this one deserves also a lot of credit. Let's go to the next game. We have Clarkstown North at Pelham, and this was an important league game, and Pelham winning 34-7. All we're trying to figure out, again, when you look on the south side, you got Harrison at 1, Eastchester and South battling out for 2 and 3. Who's going to be that fourth team, right? And Clarkstown North came off a big victory versus Greeley, and now Pelham beating North. So that makes things so interesting now for that final spot. So interesting to see what's going to happen here. But Pelham with a huge victory, and it was led by Massarelli at he had 180 total yards and 3 touchdowns. And this defense really locked up. This was a very strong performance at home. I thought Pelham might win this game. I like the way that they were playing, even though Clarkstown North was playing with a lot of physicality. Pelham matched that, and they got a huge victory now going into this final week of the regular season with that fourth spot being wide open. So interested to see that. Pelham lost to Greeley earlier in the year, so it's kind of like a 3-way tie here. So very interesting there. Let's go to the next game, B matchup, Sleepy Hollow at Pleasantville. Pleasantville winning 46-7, and Pleasantville goes to 6-0. Sleepy Hollow drops to 2-5. And let's talk about Pleasantville. They have been playing at a very high level, and it continued in this game. 40-0 at halftime, and this was the Daniel Picard show. He had 6 carries, 166 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Also had a 75-yard receiving touchdown, so over 230 yards from Daniel Picard, and he was absolutely tremendous. They couldn't tackle him in that game. Sleepy Hollow could not tackle him, but he wasn't alone. Ryan Horgan had a very strong performance. We know about him defensively. He had 10 tackles, but also a rushing touchdown. Sadao, another one on the defensive side and offensive side with a rushing touchdown. Offensively, they ran the ball for 231 yards. So really strong performance. And defensively, they forced 4 turnovers. So Philip Dundee, he's another guy who's kind of made some plays over these last few weeks, had a pick 6 and a fumble recovery. He's made some plays for this defense. He's starting to really rise here. McPhee had a fumble recovery, and Fitzy Byrne also had a fumble recovery. So playing really well on both sides of the ball, limiting them to 7 points. Really dominant performance, 40-0 at half, KO'd right there, and Pleasantville goes to 6-0. Let's go to another matchup here, B matchup, Croton Harmon at Putnam Valley. And Putnam Valley winning 26-7. And these B games are so important, again, for that Pioneer system for the playoffs. But Putnam Valley gets a big victory going to 4-2. Croton Harmon dropping to 2-4. And Croton Harmon, listen, they were getting some movement, but the turnovers were killer for them. And when we got to the second half, Putnam Valley's defense really stepped up. And they stopped the run. They got after the quarterback. And defensively for Croton Harmon, they had difficulties slowing down the run. They did a pretty good job in the beginning, but then things started to really open up running the ball. And the turnovers and stopping the run was really what hurt them in the end. And looking at Putnam Valley, Ricky Meister, he had 154 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, also 5 tackles and a forced fumble and a sack. Defensively, really strong performance on both sides. But this game really turned, and 2 players that really made a show for Putnam Valley, especially defensively, is Caden Glenn and Alex Desage. Caden Glenn, Croton Harmon was driving, and he made a huge sack that turned this game. But 6 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He was really good defensively. And Alex Desage, he had 8 tackles, 2 fumble recoveries, and 1 for a fumble recovery for a touchdown defensively. So really strong performance by those 2 guys. Really kind of pushed the momentum for Putnam Valley in this game. They weren't alone. Tarrant also had 7 tackles and a forced fumble. Dobra is another guy we've seen multiple times this week on these shows. Him making plays as well defensively. Putnam Valley's defense is legit. Now, offensively, if they don't run the ball, that's a big concern. But defensively, they can really get after you. And when they can run it, it's a pretty nice dynamic there. Big victory for Putnam Valley. Let's go to the next game, double A matchup, Carmel at Yonkers Forest, and Carmel winning 43-27. Carmel going to 5-1. Yonkers Forest dropping to 3-4. Listen, after last week, I thought Yonkers Forest was going to come out with a lot more intensity in this game, and they did. But Carmel's offense really exploded, and I thought they were going to be running the football, and they did have success running the ball, but it was the passing game that was really impressive in this one. And Nunez, 9 of 14, 153 yards and 3 touchdowns, did have a pick. But he was really good, and the passing game worked really well. And Santiago was leading the way with 75 yards receiving and 2 of those touchdowns. And then Abel also had a receiving touchdown. So the passing attack woke up in this one. They like to get outside the pocket, like do play action. But Werlu, he had another 120-yard game and a touchdown here. Venables had 70 yards rushing and a touchdown. Tamba also had a rushing touchdown. So again, multiple guys who can run the ball. Can they get a complimentary pass attack? They showed up in this game. Defensively, they did give up some big plays, and one of them was a kick return touchdown. And the pass attack is difficult with these speedy wide receivers of Yonkers Forest. So they did give up some big plays defensively, but Risley leading the way with 11 tackles and a forced fumble. They made enough, and the offense kind of carried things to another victory. And when we look at Yonkers Forest, Aquino, we know about him. We've talked about him quite a few times. The wide receiver of Yonkers Forest is a special talent, very fast. He had over 100 yards received, 135 and a touchdown on 9 receptions. Also had the kick return touchdown. And Testamark is another guy who has been making plays these last few weeks. He had a touchdown reception as well and an INT. Fields had 2 of those touchdowns, 168 yards passing. Fry ran the ball relatively well with 86 yards and a touchdown. So the offense did get moving, but defensively couldn't make enough plays on the defense to slow down this Carmel attack. Big victory for Carmel. They won the league. All right, so let's keep going. We have another huge B matchup, probably the game of the week, and that was Ardsley in the B class, Ardsley at Rye. And this was a highly anticipated game, and boy, Rye made a statement. Rye won 42-14. Rye goes to 5-2. Ardsley drops to 5-1. And let's start with Ardsley, because I still think they're a very talented team and a contending team. But on the road at Rye, and Rye is getting healthier, they had a tough performance. Defensively, they gave up over 500 yards. And this is a very good defense, and they rely on their defense to make plays for them, and 500 yards, that is just way too much, right? Rye didn't punt in this game. Offensively, they also had 3 turnovers, right? So give up a lot of big plays on defense, and you turn the ball over, and that's a recipe for disaster. The quarterback, Rendy, he had 86 yards passing and a touchdown, but the turnovers were killer. Silverman had the receiving touchdown on their end. Dulcine also had a long touchdown run. But just they couldn't get stops. Turnovers were killer, and Ardsley's going to have to, again, playing teams like Rye, you can't be able to do that, especially on the road. So they're definitely going to have to look onto that. But when I look at Rye, this was a really great performance by A.J. Miller, the quarterback, who was super efficient, made big-time plays for his team. 19 of 28, 249 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also had a rush touchdown. So 4 touchdown performance and over 260 yards of total offense. So he was really good. This offense also rushed for 258 yards. Luliano had 83. Ramachandran had 62 yards and a touchdown. And it was good to see their wide receiver Griffiths back, because he's a big-time player for them. He led the way with 5 receptions, 42 yards and a touchdown. Stevens had 2 receiving touchdowns on 90 yards receiving. So you're seeing playmakers coming back. They're getting healthier and healthier offensively. Defensively, still missing a couple guys, but they forced 3 turnovers, like I mentioned. Gonzalez helping lead the way defensively. Again, this was a very, very strong performance. Kesner also had an INT on defense, so wanted to mention that. But this was a really strong performance on both sides of the ball for Rye, and a big statement win for them. Let's go to another game. There's a double-A game. We got Suffern at Scarsdale. Big league game, and Scarsdale winning 20-7. And let's start with Suffern. This was a bit surprising to me. Jeff Joseph, he had a rushing touchdown, but just not enough offense. They couldn't finish drives. I've seen they make some big plays, but the drive stall, whether it's penalties, whether it's just mistakes, and Scarsdale did a good job capitalizing on it. And ending drives. And defensively, they did really struggle tackling. That was a big surprise to me. Really like this defensive unit from Suffern, but too many missed tackles was a big one against Scarsdale. And when I look at Scarsdale, what a performance they had defensively, really keeping things locked down. Gilligan has been such an important player, running that option at the fullback spot. He was a big performer. He had a rushing touchdown. Knopp had a couple big plays as well. This was a really impressive performance from Scarsdale at home, defensively and offensively, doing just enough, but defensively really swarming and stopping things. This was a huge victory. Scarsdale goes to 4-2. Suffern drops to 4-2. Let's talk about a Hudson Valley Football League game. Portchester at Tappan Zee, and Tappan Zee was absolutely dominant in this one, winning 40-0. They go to 5-1, dropping Portchester to 2-4. And Tappan Zee, Owen O'Hara, he's been making plays. Talked about him a few times. These last couple weeks, he's really shined. Had a long touchdown run, but it's this defense who just locked things down. These last 2 weeks have been very impressive. Kevin, excuse me. Kevin Kukla had a fumble recovery. Tynan Murray had a pick six. Louis Marino had a fumble recovery. This defense forced 3 or 4 turnovers, and they have just been absolutely dominant these last 2 weeks. So shout out to Tappan Zee going to 5-1. Let's go to the next game. Double A matchup, White Plains at North Rockland. North Rockland winning 21-0, moving North Rockland to 5-2. White Plains drops to 0-6. And let's just talk about North Rockland. Offensively, they really did move the ball well. 357 yards of total offense and only 1 turnover. Now, again, we'd like to see no turnovers because we know about the turnover issues North Rockland's had, but they were able to move the ball. And Hamilton, 6 of 11, 112 yards and a touchdown. No picks. Had the fumble, but again, not turning the ball over a lot is so important for this team. And running the ball, they rushed for 246 yards. Right, Savor leading the way with 120 and a touchdown. Also had a fumble recovery on defense. Jaquan Johnson really stepped up in this one with 81 yards rushing. Farrar had the receiving touchdown. And this defense pitching a shutout, led by Jaden Harrison with 8 tackles and 2 sacks. But they swarmed to the ball. Veit had 11 tackles. Martinez had 11 tackles. This defense did a really good job of swarming, getting the shutout. If they can play strong defense and run the ball without turning the ball over, North Rockland can be a very dangerous team. All right, let's go to another really good game. CD matchup, Haldane at Valhalla, and Haldane winning 15-6, moving Haldane to 5-1. Valhalla drops to 3-3. And let's start with Haldane. Offensively, they didn't move the ball a lot. They had 225 yards of offense, 165 of that on the ground, and 1 turnover. Quarterback Van Tassel, not the best passing performance, 3 of 10 against a very stout Valhalla defense. He did have a passing touchdown, but 81 yards rushing and a touchdown as well. So his legs was a key factor in this. Gianchinta had 77 yards rushing. He also had that long receiving touchdown, about 26 yards. So that duo, again, doing enough offensively, but it's this defense that did a phenomenal job. They limited Valhalla to 209 yards of total offense, and they did give up some big rush yards, but they were stout against the pass, and Stubblefield was tremendous. 12 tackles, had a sack, also a pick. Corliss had 5 tackles. Stickle had 5 tackles. So this defense really swarmed and got after the football. And this was a physical game. When I look at Valhalla again offensively, they only had 10 yards passing, right? 199 yards rushing, which was pretty darn good. But where it really killed them, again, the yards are pretty similar. 2 of 12 on third down offensively, right? So a lot of, non-conversions on third down. They did have a turnover. They had a passing touchdown. Defensively, only giving up 225 yards, but big plays was the key one, right? A 41-yard touchdown run and a 26-yard touchdown pass. Those are the big plays that were the difference in this one. So let's see how they respond. All right, let's go to the next game. Hudson Valley Football League. We got Poughkeepsie at Walter Panis. This was a very good game that I got to watch. Offensively for Poughkeepsie, they really moved the ball very well, but defensively just giving up way too many big plays and had a difficulty stopping the run. And Walter Panis, it was good to see Carlucci back. He's one of the best players in the Hudson Valley Football League, one of the best athletes in this area. And it was nice to see him back, and he is a big impact player, right? You can see Walter Panis looks very different when he is out there. Tetro had 4 of the touchdowns here, but Carlucci made some huge plays for this team offensively. And defensively, they made the stop that they needed to at the end to win the game. Very good game. Walter Panis gets their first win of the season going 1-5. Poughkeepsie drops to 1-6. All right, next one, we have a C matchup, rematch of the Section 1 C title from last year. Dobbs Ferry at Westlake, and Westlake winning 8-0 in this one. This was a defensive slugfest, and Westlake goes to 5-0. Dobbs Ferry drops to 3-2. And let's start with Dobbs Ferry. Offensively, it was a real struggle. Westlake did a really good job of swarming the ball. Dobbs Ferry just couldn't get any momentum going. Only had 70 yards of offense. And defensively, they played very well. Outside the first drive, I thought they really swarmed after the ball as well. Marty O'Leary had a fumble recovery. Alon Maseri had an INT. So they were able to make some big plays in key moments to give their team a chance to win this game. But offensively, they just couldn't move the ball. And when you look at Westlake, Callie had the big rushing touchdown, only 56 yards total, but that was the big touchdown. That was the difference, right? Offensively, 237 yards, again, which is not bad, right? But not a lot of offense either. Chris Archiello, he had 69 yards rushing, but this defense was the key. The defense played phenomenal. They really locked things down. And Dodd Ferry, they had 7 3-and-outs, right? So Westlake really swarmed the ball. Ralph Savino had 2 sacks. Darren Nelson had the pick to end the game. But this defense as a whole, multiple guys swarming to the football, really locked down Dodd Ferry running the ball, and the play action pass did not work. So big victory for Westlake there, winning 8-0. All right. Let's go to the next game. We got Somers at John Jay Cross River in an A matchup. Somers dominating 38-3. And when I look at Somers, Max Sullivan, another strong performance, 11 of 18, 148 yards and 2 touchdowns, also 52 yards rushing. Kelly, another strong performance by him as well, 115 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, so 5 touchdowns between those two. That's the dynamic duo. And Dean Palazzolo, the spark plug at the wide receiver spot, he also had 4 catches for 52 yards. Kapika and Conti had receiving touchdowns for his team. And this defense, again, shutting things down for Cross River. They did have a field goal, but a real dominant performance by this Somers defense going into this giant matchup next week. And we look at John Jay. Nick Russo, I thought, had a strong game on both sides. And James Arfish, who's probably one of the best DBs in the section, another strong performance from him. But just they couldn't get going offensively against this tough Somers defense. All right, let's go to the B game. Hastings at Briarcliff Hamilton football program. Briarcliff winning 28-6, giving them their second win of the season, going to 2-4. Hastings drops to 1-5. And the big winner here is the defense of Briarcliff Hamilton football program, which has been pretty solid all year round. And this was a very strong performance by them. And the offense, again, was wanting to see if they can get going, but Hastings had issues stopping teams. And so Briarcliff took advantage of that, got the offense going, but it was this defense, again, locking things down. Big victory for Briarcliff. I apologize, guys. Throat bothering a little bit, but let's push through it and just get a quick drink. Let's go to another huge A matchup here. This is another one that was so big, and that was Clarkstown South at Eastchester. Both teams vying for the second spot in the South League, and Eastchester winning 40-21. And this was a huge game. Eastchester going to 5-2. Clarkstown South dropping to 2-4 in the league. And let's start with Clarkstown South. Offensively was really firing in the first half. They were really moving the ball very well. This was a back and forth game, but the second half was where Eastchester dominated. And the turnovers, again, reared its ugly head. They had 3 turnovers in this one. And that's been the big issue, is turnovers. Turnovers and finishing drives have been a key issue for this offense. Defensively, I think things, they played pretty well in the first half, but in the second half, 20 unanswered points, right? And it doesn't help with the turnovers, but defensively, they weren't great. And Holder, he had to pass a touchdown with those 3 INTs. Butler had 2 rushing touchdowns. Teetle had the receiving touchdown, but again, Eastchester dominated in the second half, and that's the difference in this game. It's the tale of 2 halves. First half, very competitive, moving the ball. Second half, they were dominating on both sides. And when I look at Eastchester, the defense I mentioned really stepped up. 20 unanswered points. They only allowed 66 yards in the second half. This is a very strong defensive unit. In the beginning, Clarkstown South was really moving on them, and it was probably a little shocking for their defense because they've been stout all year, but in the second half, they really revved it up. And let's start with their offense and Schultz, who he's had a very, very strong year, and he's so important for this team. 12 of 17 passing, 190 yards and 3 touchdowns, also 2 rushing touchdowns, 5 touchdowns for Schultz, also had an INT on defense. Chiafone had 45 yards rushing and a touchdown. McCloskey had 2 of those receiving touchdowns. He also had one of the INTs. Mike Provenzali had a receiving touchdown. So multiple guys on offense, and that's where Eastchester does best. Moving the ball around. Schultz is obviously the orchestrator of that. But this defense is the thing that if they're going to compete in the playoffs, it's going to be led by their defense. Martucci had 13 tackles. Bruner had 9 tackles and an INT. This defense really getting after it is going to be so important. Dominating up front, competing up front is going to be huge for Eastchester. Big, big victory. Now they're, again, a victory next week. guarantees them a home playoff game for Eastchester, but this puts them in the driver's seat. Let's go to the next game, Double A matchup, RCK at New Rochelle, and New Rochelle winning 20-7. And New Rochelle, they had success getting to the outside, attacking the edges of the defense. Number 7, Michaela Allen had a long rushing touchdown, also had a big pick in this game. Raiden Davis was also able to get to the outside on some impressive runs, so a lot of outside runs, counters. James also had a long touchdown run. Dawson made some big plays on offense, and it's this defense, again, forcing the turnovers and really locking down RCK. The front seven played pretty well. So big victory for New Rochelle. That was a league game as well. Next game, a B matchup, Byram Hills at Pearl River. Pearl River winning 21-6, going to 5-1, dropping Byram Hills to 2-4. This is the first time I think Pearl River's won in this matchup since 2016, right? So big victory for Pearl River at home, and it starts again with this defense. This defense has been really, really strong. Guys like Sean Davin has made a lot of plays. Ben Raspani had a blocked punt. Tobacco had a fumble recovery. But Dagon McLaughlin really led the way in this one. He had such a good performance. 12 tackles, 2 INTs. This defense is pretty strong all year long. It was if offensively they can continue to grow on the offensive line. And Nick Aspinall, 3 rushing touchdowns, so they do just enough offensively. And this defense locked things down, forcing turnovers, making it very difficult. They're very aggressive. Huge victory for Pearl River. Another big game is Edgemont at Rhinebeck, and Rhinebeck winning 19-12. This was a very good game in the rain, in the ugliness. Edgemont really, they got down. They really competed to draw back, had an opportunity to potentially tie the game, but Rhinebeck makes just enough plays defensively in this one. I think forcing that INT at the end. But let's talk about Rhinebeck. Another victory for them, going to 6-1. Merkel had 3 passing touchdowns, one to Conaway, one to Bryan, and one to Killigaman. Excuse me. And again, they got up, and Edgemont was climbing its way back, and they were starting to run the ball, and things were getting a little bit dicey. But this defense made enough plays, and Rhinebeck deserves a lot of credit making plays on both sides of the ball. And Freddie Evans had an INT, Quinn Byron had an INT, Tyler Sergio had a forced fumble, Jaden Schneider's another one who's made some plays for his team. So this was a good performance at home. Needed to have the victory to have an opportunity now next week in a huge game, probably a win and get in the playoffs type of game. So Rhinebeck going to 6-1. Big victory there. Last 2 games, guys. Let's talk about a C matchup. Bronxville at Woodlands, and Bronxville dominating 40-0. Offense really exploded, but it was the defense locking things down. Coming off the bye, which was huge for Bronxville, getting back on track. Dominant performance on both sides of the ball. Huge victory for Bronxville there. And finally, the Hudson Valley Football League, Ramapo at Peekskill, another low-scoring defensive game. And Ramapo, what killed them offensively, 4 turnovers, right? Now, defensively, they forced 3, right? But the turnovers were absolutely killer for their offense. Devontae Brown had the rushing touchdown, but just too many negative plays offensively. And for Peekskill, they scored on a swing pass, but offensively, again, things have been stalling the last couple weeks. But it's the defense that have helped carry things. Again, another strong performance, 6 points or less. I think they've allowed 14 or less every game this year. So this has been a strong defensive unit, really getting after the football, and they make just enough plays offensively to win. Peekskill goes to 4-2. Ramapo drops to 1-5. All right, everyone, that was our show. Thank you guys so much, as always. Big shout out to our teams of the week. Thank you guys for the Patreon community for doing all the things that you guys do. I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you all very soon.